brilliant sapphire eyes sparkle with the blinding radiance of flawless, enchanting jewels. A cascade of shining golden hair frames a visage of absolute, undeniable perfection. Miriam effortlessly steals every gaze with her smooth, pale skin that rivals royalty itself. Compared to her blinding light, a stark and agonizing contrast silently emerges from the shadows. Serafina languishes in dim rooms, burdened by dull, faded brown hair that completely lacks her sister's golden luster. Society endlessly scrutinizes the plain girl, constantly measuring her worth against Miriam's overwhelming splendor. Yet, a fragile glimmer of hope stubbornly persists within Serafina's quiet, unassuming heart. Cruel whispers mock the gloomy noblewoman as she isolates herself with her relentless embroidery. Master Conrad dramatically arrives to claim his date, effortlessly lifting her spirits while ignoring the endless comparisons. He gently calls Serafina's name, wrapping her fragile heart in unexpected, comforting warmth. To her desperately yearning soul, his presence blazes with the magnificent, life-giving power of the sun. She fiercely clings to these stolen moments, finding absolute bliss whenever she stands by his side. 2 fleeting years of their engagement have woven a tapestry of deep, irreplaceable memories. Unaware of the profound depth of her devotion, he casually notes her radiant, undeniable happiness. She silently prays for this joy to last eternally, just as a cold shift instantly alters the atmosphere. The comforting warmth completely vanishes, instantly replaced by a sudden and chilling tension. Conrad ruthlessly shatters her world, coldly demanding the immediate dissolution of their sacred engagement. A single, devastating sentence effortlessly obliterates 2 entire years of cherished, unwavering devotion. Utter shock paralyzes Serafina as the brutal reality of his betrayal aggressively crashes down upon her. Miriam suddenly materializes, triumphantly announcing that Conrad will marry her instead of her failed sister. Weaponizing Serafina's gentle nature, Miriam maliciously demands her complete and unquestioning understanding. Conrad weakly reprimands his new lover for interrupting, but Miriam playfully dismisses his half-hearted scolding. The legendary Miracle Knight perfectly aligns with Miriam, a woman who effortlessly surpasses Serafina in both magic and beauty. The breathtaking couple stands united, radiating a sickeningly perfect synergy that suffocates the room. Agonizing heartbreak violently rips through Serafina as she silently witnesses their undeniable, intimate bond. Suffocating humiliation fuels a desperate, overwhelming urge to scream and flee the unbearable scene. Crushing inferiority finally convinces her she lacks the talent and grace to ever stand beside him. She entirely surrenders to the devastating assumption that he views her as fundamentally worthless. A quiet, defeated realization slowly washes over her completely shattered and broken spirit. Her darkest, longest-held terrors of inevitable abandonment finally manifest into brutal, inescapable reality. Unshed tears violently burn her eyes as her fragile world crumbles into irreparable, jagged pieces. But even amidst the agonizing ruin, a desperate spark of dignity violently ignites within her. She forcefully swallows her suffocating grief, forcibly straightening her posture to face her tormentors. Drawing upon her absolute final reserve of inner strength, she bravely confronts her agonizing fate. Serafina officially accepts the broken engagement, delivering her concession with heartbreaking, unyielding grace. Conrad cruelly dismisses the handmade scarf she gifted him, callously admitting he forgot it in his pocket. Desperate to escape, Serafina hurriedly attempts to excuse herself from the suffocating nightmare. He ruthlessly forces the rejected scarf back into her hands, arrogantly boasting that Miriam will pick out a better one. He mockingly dismisses their past as a trivial dream, insulting her quiet nature as a lonely seamstress. Serafina stands utterly abandoned, her beautiful dream violently extinguished by their merciless and absolute departure. Her ruthless parents violently berate Serafina for her catastrophically weak magic, cruelly praising Miriam for seamlessly taking her rightful place. They aggressively defend Miriam's sudden treachery, coldly declaring it a far superior outcome to suffering humiliating infidelity after a wedding. Her stunningly beautiful mother fiercely dotes on Miriam, while her harsh father completely dismisses Serafina for lacking both magical prowess and male utility. Crushing despair completely overwhelms Serafina as she agonizingly realizes she miserably failed her single fundamental purpose in the noble family. She painfully accepts her grim reality as a mere political tool, thoroughly eclipsed by a sister who greedily monopolized all the family's love, beauty, and power. Suffocating isolation fully engulfs the rejected daughter as she silently retreats into the cold, unforgiving shadows of her profoundly lonely existence. A massive, daunting piece of heavy fabric dramatically arrives, its vast surface completely covered in intricate, demanding numbered patterns. Seeking a desperate escape, Serafina firmly commands her curious maid to leave the massive fabric so she can frantically lift her shattered spirits through relentless embroidery. 2 years ago, the Viscount's plain daughter officially betrothed Conrad Dexter, a legendary miracle knight who famously returns from brutal enemy campaigns without a single scratch. From their very first fateful encounter, his warm laughter and unexpectedly kind words effortlessly captured her entirely unsuspecting heart. Radiant, undeniable memories of their budding romance vividly flash through her mind, shining with an agonizingly beautiful and brilliant intensity. Glorious visions of a joyous, picture-perfect wedding day painfully torment her fragile spirit with hollow promises of a future now completely destroyed. She bitterly acknowledges that her pure, overflowing devotion holds absolutely no place in this cruel, incredibly unforgiving world anymore. Their highly anticipated winter wedding, meant to forever unite the 19-year-old elite knight and the 18-year-old noblewoman, completely vanishes into thin air. Miriam, the pampered and adored princess of the manor, now selfishly monopolizes Conrad, entirely claiming the devoted knight as her exclusive prize. The stunning new couple boldly flaunts their undeniable chemistry, radiating a sickeningly perfect aura that utterly mocks Serafina's absolute ruin. A passionate, devastatingly intimate romantic exchange between the betrayers completely shatters the very last remaining fragments of Serafina's totally broken heart. Absolute shock violently paralyzes her fragile frame as the agonizing, suffocating weight of their brutal betrayal finally crushes her weary spirit. Torrents of hot, silent tears fiercely stream down her pale face, aggressively washing away the pathetic remnants of her utterly shattered dreams. A dark, incredibly cynical resignation firmly takes root within her wounded soul, absolutely confirming the tragic inevitability she secretly feared all along. With a decisive, loudly echoing snap, she fiercely cuts the binding thread, forcefully severing her agonizing emotional ties to the incredibly painful past. A fiery, entirely unexpected determination suddenly blazes in her tear-filled eyes as she fiercely channels her immense grief directly into her nimble needles. She fiercely grips her wooden embroidery hoop, loudly declaring it the single, absolute lifeline she fiercely refuses to ever surrender to anyone. Frantically scanning the complex, sprawling patterns, she strategically plots her next creative move, seeking total emotional salvation within the colorful woven threads. While ordinary nobles bravely face vicious silver wolves with meager spells, only a tiny elite fraction wields true offensive or healing magic on the bloody battlefield. Bound by strict tradition, deploying knights heavily rely on crucial mana transfers from their devoted families or betrothed partners before charging into deadly combat. 2 years ago, she agonizingly managed to transfer only a pathetic trickle of mana to Conrad, who arrogantly dismissed her effort by blindly boasting of his own superior power. Suffocating, unbearable guilt viciously tormented her helpless heart as she painfully watched him march into mortal danger completely lacking her magical protection. Desperate for a meaningful purpose, a sudden, incredibly brilliant epiphany powerfully struck her frantic, desperately searching mind like a blinding flash of lightning. She obsessively poured her entire soul into her intricate needlework, frantically praying for his absolute safety through the sole, humble talent she actually possessed. Her nimble hands move with blinding, relentless speed, violently transforming the plain cloth into an incredibly intricate tapestry of desperate, unwavering devotion. Total exhaustion finally forces a heavy, shuddering sigh from her dry lips, momentarily halting her frantic, entirely obsessive stitching marathon. She carefully inspects her massive, highly detailed creation, completely astonished by the sheer, unbelievable volume of her own manic, grief-fueled labor. Thoroughly surprised by an entire flock of densely embroidered sheep, she eagerly plans to fiercely weave intricate roses, verbena, and violets next. Her desperate, relentless need to completely escape agonizing reality through constant stitching rightfully earned her a highly infamous, mocking household nickname. She bitterly concedes to Miriam's cruel logic, forcefully accepting that her plain, unmagical existence belongs solely beside her embroidery, not the dazzling miracle knight. She entirely abandons all foolish, lingering hopes of romance, firmly resolving to quietly live out her remaining days in complete isolation as the solitary seamstress lady. She blindly trusts that the relentless, sweeping passage of time will eventually heal the deeply festering, pitch-black void completely consuming her ruined heart. 2 quiet weeks after the catastrophic betrayal, she completely seals herself inside the sprawling manor, fanatically devoting every single waking hour strictly to her needles. A sudden, incredibly jarring announcement violently shatters her peaceful isolation, completely shocking her with the totally unexpected arrival of the esteemed Count Middleton. The infamous Ice Count, Alexis Middleton, dramatically makes his unexpected appearance. This mysterious young nobleman possesses breathtaking beauty and unparalleled mastery in both lethal swordsmanship and devastating magic, while ruthlessly hiding his frozen heart from the entire world. Serafina gazes up at the towering, enigmatic figure standing silently in her modest home. Utterly bewildered by his sudden arrival, She frantically searches her memory for any past connection to the dazzling nobleman. The Count locks his piercing, unreadable gaze entirely upon her bewildered form. Mesmerized by his striking features, she nervously stammers out a polite but incredibly tense greeting. Count Alexis Middleton firmly introduces himself, radiating an impossibly cold and commanding aura devoid of any mortal flaws. Her aggressive father suddenly violently bursts into the room, forcefully shattering the suffocating tension. Viscount Archibald aggressively throws his hands up in overwhelming excitement and total disbelief. His booming voice dramatically echoes through the incredibly tense drawing room. The boisterous Viscount joyfully announces that the esteemed Count has arrived to officially demand Serafina's hand in marriage. Complete shock instantly paralyzes Serafina as the absurd, entirely unfathomable word violently echoes in her ringing ears. Her father forcefully gestures toward his bewildered daughter, eagerly orchestrating this totally unexpected miracle. He forcefully commands both of them to take a seat while Serafina hopelessly struggles to process the unbelievable matrimonial claim. A chaotic storm of sheer confusion violently swirls within her rapidly spinning mind. She desperately questions why a man whose legendary popularity rivals even Conrad's would ever desire the notoriously plain seamstress lady. Her father eagerly claims the Count instantly fell in love with her at last year's royal garden party and seized the chance after her broken engagement. Desperately scouring her memories, she firmly recalls attending the crowded gala with Conrad but finds absolutely no trace of the Ice Count. Highly suspicious of this supposed love at first sight, she nervously bites her tongue to avoid loudly insulting her powerful suitor. Her callous father viciously berates her hesitation, harshly reminding the rejected daughter she holds absolutely zero leverage to refuse such a miracle. The frozen nobleman sharply shifts his piercing gaze toward the loud, incredibly overbearing Viscount. With absolute, chilling authority, Alexis firmly declares that Serafina remains entirely free to make her own independent choice. His icy words violently slice through the room as he ruthlessly reminds the Viscount who exactly holds the proposal. Commanding total obedience, the powerful Count politely yet forcefully demands a completely private audience with his bewildered bride-to-be. Thoroughly intimidated by the Count's overwhelming presence, the cowardly Viscount hastily scrambles out of the tense room. The heavy wooden door clicks firmly shut, instantly sealing the totally mismatched pair inside an incredibly suffocating silence. Alexis locks his intense, unwavering gaze onto the trembling young woman sitting directly across from him. The incredibly heavy, frosty atmosphere thickens dangerously as he softly calls out her name. Paralyzed by burning insecurity, she secretly assumes he tragically mistook her for her dazzling sister Miriam and anticipates an immediate withdrawal. Noting her obvious distress, the pragmatic Count firmly resolves to bypass all pleasantries and deliver his true intentions completely unmasked. A shocking, highly unexpected term dramatically drops into the silent space between the anxious couple. Alexis ruthlessly shatters all romantic illusions by bluntly proposing a strictly platonic white marriage. He coldly explains that his incredibly meddlesome relatives relentlessly refuse to recognize an unmarried youth as the legitimate head of the massive estate. This ruthless contractual union guarantees a completely loveless marriage of convenience entirely devoid of any messy emotional entanglements. Desperately needing his annoying family's cooperation to manage the vast lands, he practically requires a convenient wife strictly to silence their endless complaints. Serafina erupts in violent, uncontrollable blushing when he bluntly clarifies she will never have to share his marital bed. The normally flawless Count briefly falters, stiffly apologizing for his incredibly blunt and utterly shameless delivery. Mortified by her own intensely explosive reaction, she frantically attempts to conceal her violently burning crimson face. She silently questions why such a powerful lord would ever choose a publicly tainted, rejected woman when he could easily command any noble lady. Alexis completely obliterates her lingering doubts by firmly and decisively declaring she is his one and only acceptable choice. Serafina hesitates, warning the Count that the nasty rumors surrounding her broken engagement would inevitably taint his pristine reputation. Alexis fiercely shuts down her anxious worries, bluntly declaring he does not care about the vicious gossip in the slightest. He gently grasps her trembling hands in a surprisingly tender and entirely unexpected gesture. Serafina internally grounds herself, strictly reminding her foolish heart that absolutely no romantic love exists within this pragmatic arrangement. Despite her cynical thoughts, a shocking, undeniable warmth violently radiates from his large, steadfast hands. The Ice Count leans in, preparing to deliver the final, completely irresistible condition of his unbelievable proposal. He strategically promises her unlimited access to premium thread and fabric, guaranteeing a completely private sanctuary just for her. Alexis seals the deal by revealing that Sheafield Castle boasts a magnificent sewing room fully equipped to rival any professional tailor. Instantly captivated by the promise of endless embroidery, Serafina eagerly gasps and completely surrenders to his incredible offer. The supposedly flawless, unshakable Count visibly falters, utterly stunned by her sudden, explosive burst of pure enthusiasm. A heavy, stunned silence briefly fills the tense room as he rapidly processes her wildly unexpected shift in demeanor. Serafina beams with blinding joy, loudly and fiercely declaring her absolute pleasure in accepting the matrimonial contract. Recovering his icy composure, Alexis firmly double-checks if she remains entirely certain about her remarkably swift decision. Overflowing with genuine gratitude, she enthusiastically thanks Count Middleton for his incredibly wonderful and life-altering proposal. Time marches forward, signifying the rapid, undeniable sealing of their highly unconventional aristocratic pact. Serafina fully accepts her completely new, strictly ceremonial role as the purely ornamental wife of the powerful Ice Count. Through this binding contract marriage, the famously plain seamstress officially transforms into the esteemed Lady Serafina Middleton. Vicious high society gossip violently explodes as bewildered nobles express sheer disbelief that the flawless Ice Earl chose the plain older sister. Bound by the strict third article of their confidential contract, Serafina silently endures the rumors without ever revealing their white marriage secret. Shock ripples through the arrogant aristocracy as they frantically question if the infamous seamstress lady secretly possesses incredible hidden charms. Conrad's infuriating image flashes in her mind, fiercely reminding her of the cruel man who utterly shattered her heart and fled to Miriam. Serafina thoughtfully ponders her incredibly bizarre, rapidly changing situation while silently staring into the vast distance. Merely glancing at her treacherous sister aggressively resurrects the deeply agonizing memories of her completely humiliating public rejection. She deeply reflects on the miraculous, life-altering moment Lord Alexis proposed their strictly platonic white marriage. Before his totally unexpected arrival, she had fiercely resolved to completely isolate herself and live solely for her beloved embroidery. She secretly harbors deep, lingering doubts regarding the enigmatic Count's true, unspoken motives for specifically choosing a disgraced noblewoman. However, the intoxicating promise of a fully funded, entirely private sewing room effortlessly obliterates all her logical hesitations. She desperately prepares herself to escape the suffocating manor long before enduring the absolute torture of an upcoming family dinner party. A terrible memory violently surfaces of Miriam enthusiastically demanding to meet the mysterious Lord Earl. Miriam obnoxiously proposed a suffocating double date, aggressively suggesting they all share an intimate dinner with Conrad. Snapping back to the present, Serafina nervously contemplates her intimidating new husband as they travel. Her racing heart violently pounds as she irrationally fears the merciless warrior might slice her down if she misspeaks during their 3-day carriage ride. A majestic, horse-drawn carriage rolls smoothly along a scenic, sunlit countryside road toward her entirely new destiny. Serafina gazes out the carriage window, her eyes instantly sparking with pure, unbridled wonder at the magnificent passing landscape. Alexis attentively monitors his newly wedded bride, projecting a surprisingly gentle and protective aura as they travel together. He politely breaks the heavy silence, softly asking if she feels unwell and suggesting they take a short, comfortable rest. She instantly declines his considerate offer, enthusiastically assuring him that the constantly shifting scenery remains incredibly delightful. Blazing with intense creative inspiration, she excitedly chatters about transforming the rustic fir trees and little houses into vibrant embroidery patterns. Suddenly realizing her intense rambling, she abruptly halts and meekly apologizes for thoroughly boring the incredibly powerful nobleman. Alexis gazes back at her in stunned silence, clearly completely caught off guard by her genuine, endearing burst of artistic passion. Alexis politely requests that Serafina change how she formally addresses him, gently reminding her that they both share the Middleton name now. Terrified of overstepping her bounds, she nervously wonders if addressing the infamous Ice Count by his given name might invite his lethal wrath. She timidly braces herself, staring intently at the impossibly handsome and silent nobleman sitting directly across from her. Mustering her fragile courage, she softly and hesitantly calls him Lord Alexis for the very first time. A surprisingly warm and gentle smile briefly graces the imposing lord's face as he acknowledges her brave effort. He quietly thanks her with a soft, undeniably tender expression that completely shatters his terrifying public reputation. A picturesque view of the serene rural inn glows warmly under the crisp, early morning light as their carriage rests outside. Waking up in her comfortable bed, Serafina stretches lazily and marvels at how incredibly soundly she slept during their long journey. She peeks out the dusty window and instantly spots a solitary, powerful figure moving swiftly in the misty courtyard below. Realizing the neighboring bed is completely empty, she notes that Lord Alexis has already risen to begin his demanding day. Alexis flawlessly executes his rigorous morning sword forms, cutting fiercely through the crisp dawn air with deadly, unmatched precision. Utterly mesmerized by his intense discipline, she watches him train with unwavering focus long before the sun fully rises. She quietly admires his unparalleled dedication as his sharp, glistening blade violently whistles through the lingering morning mist. Overwhelmed by sudden shame, she fiercely reprimands herself for lounging in her sleepwear while her incredibly formidable husband diligently trains. Determined to prove her absolute worth, she firmly resolves to wake up before the mighty warrior the very next morning. The following dawn, she violently throws off her heavy covers with absolute determination, only to discover him already absent. Despite waking up 2 whole hours earlier than the previous day, she aggressively notes that his bed is entirely empty once again. Defeated by the deafening silence of the empty room, she helplessly realizes she has somehow fallen completely behind his impossible schedule. She fondly recalls their carriage rides where Alexis passionately described his territory's delicious agricultural bounty and deeply stubborn but kind-hearted citizens. She vividly remembers gasping in pure amazement when he shared a wild local legend about a mysterious 300-year-old witch. His engaging, thoroughly captivating storytelling successfully distracted her, bringing a genuine, radiant smile to her normally tense and anxious face. Thanks to his surprisingly gentle and patient efforts, her suffocating anxiety around the incredibly intimidating lord slowly began to dissipate. The magnificent carriage smoothly traverses across breathtaking, sunlit mountain landscapes as they rapidly draw closer to his grand estate. Realizing she cannot endlessly rely on his uncharacteristic kindness, Serafina firmly decides to take immediate, proactive action to support him. Securing a refreshing pitcher of cool lemon water from the kitchen staff, she confidently marches out to meet the sweating lord. She cheerfully greets a heavily perspiring Lord Alexis as he aggressively wraps up his incredibly vigorous morning sword drills. The towering knight pauses his brutal routine, clearly startled by her sudden, totally unexpected appearance in the dusty training courtyard. Sweat aggressively drips down his chiseled face, highlighting his raw, untamed physical intensity after the grueling workout. Smiling warmly, she eagerly offers him the cool, highly refreshing glass of lemon water to quickly quench his post-training thirst. Panic instantly grips her fragile heart when he silently stares at the glass, making her irrationally fear he suspects a lethal poisoning attempt. Utterly terrified of his prolonged silence, she awkwardly stammers while his intense, unreadable gaze remains heavily locked on the offered drink. She frantically kicks herself for thoughtlessly handing an unverified beverage to a powerful noble deeply accustomed to deadly political plots. To her absolute shock, Alexis gently accepts the glass without hesitation and offers a sincere, quiet word of genuine gratitude. Her breath suddenly hitches when he softly calls her name while lightly brushing his rough, calloused fingers directly against her delicate hand. Extreme horror violently floods her mind as she realizes she just catastrophically broke the sacred contract rule forbidding any physical contact. Completely ignoring her violently spiraling panic, he calmly warns her about his notoriously troublesome relatives as they finally approach the estate. He firmly commands her to seek him out immediately if anyone dares to cause her the absolute slightest bit of trouble. Stunned by his incredibly protective tone, she silently reflects on how her cruel family would have instantly and harshly punished her trivial mistake. She quietly agrees to his generous terms, deeply bewildered that the fearsome lord remains entirely unbothered by her clumsy contractual violation. Gazing at his broad, retreating back, she softly marvels at the surprisingly lenient and entirely unpredictable nature of the mighty House Middleton. Serafina strictly commands her wildly anxious mind to maintain absolute vigilance within this completely loveless contractual marriage. A magnificent, heavy carriage violently rattles across the cobblestones, officially arriving at the breathtakingly massive Sheafield Castle. An impeccably dressed, sharp-eyed butler warmly welcomes his imposing master back to the sprawling, sunlit estate. Johnson the butler bows with absolute precision, eagerly offering his most sincere congratulations to the incredibly stunning newlywed couple. Alexis bluntly drops the explosive news of his sudden capital wedding, casually introducing a deeply shocked Johnson to his brand new wife. Total, utterly deafening silence violently crashes over the entirely paralyzed and completely bewildered household staff. A massive, suffocating wave of collective absolute shock fiercely ripples through the grand, marble-floored entrance hall. Serafina silently marvels at the breathtakingly beautiful, incredibly massive portrait gallery lining the towering, shadowed manor halls. She quietly ponders which majestic, gilded portrait depicts Alexis's late parents who tragically passed away from illness 2 years prior. Alexis grandly pushes open a heavy wooden door, dramatically unveiling her highly anticipated, entirely private sewing room. Pure, unadulterated awe completely paralyzes Serafina as she steps into the incredibly magnificent, fully equipped crafting sanctuary. The stoic count casually instructs his absolutely stunned wife to effortlessly direct any future material requests strictly to Johnson. Utterly overwhelmed by the premium thread and flawless wood grain, Serafina completely loses her mind in glorious, blinding creative ecstasy. Hot tears of pure, explosive joy violently stream down her flushed face as she fervently screams her absolute, undying gratitude. Alexis coldly brushes off her intense emotional outburst, strictly reminding her that this sanctuary remains a simple, non-negotiable contractual obligation. An incredibly intense, fiery determination suddenly and violently blazes within Serafina's wildly burning, resolute eyes. She fiercely rejects his icy dismissal, passionately vowing to fulfill her absolute duty as his nominal wife with complete, unwavering sincerity. Alexis stares back in complete, heavily stunned silence, utterly disarmed by her sudden, incredibly blinding display of pure dedication. Flawlessly recovering his icy composure, he softly accepts her passionate resolve while gently leaving the massive estate's matters in her capable hands. Instant, crippling regret violently washes over Serafina as she frantically wonders if her wild, unhinged enthusiasm thoroughly disgusted the quiet lord. Alexis seamlessly shatters her rapidly rising panic by calmly promising to introduce her to their trusted, elite tradesman the very next day. Following his swift departure, Serafina enthusiastically spends her entire afternoon diligently learning about the vast household staff from the patient butler. Johnson warmly praises her incredible, unwavering diligence, deeply misinterpreting her frantic desire to simply be of practical, emotionless use. Blushing furiously, she frantically waves her hands in total, chaotic denial of his incredibly touching but completely misguided compliments. The veteran butler smiles with absolute, heartwarming sincerity, blissfully declaring that his notoriously serious master finally found a truly devoted wife. Crippling, unbearable guilt violently shreds her fragile conscience as she silently screams that their sham marriage contains absolutely zero romantic love. Desperate to forcefully escape the deeply uncomfortable subject, she suddenly pivots her complete attention back to the pressing household logistics. She nervously questions Johnson about Alexis's exact whereabouts, entirely unaware of the sudden, incredibly heavy shift polluting the room's atmosphere. The previously warm butler violently stiffens, his friendly face instantly freezing into a tight, incredibly guarded expression of total robotic ignorance. An awkward, suffocatingly tense silence heavily descends as the incredibly evasive servant completely dodges her simple, totally straightforward question. A painful, agonizingly familiar sense of deep dread violently pierces her chest as she instantly recognizes that highly specific, tragically evasive reaction. She vividly remembers receiving that exact same pitiful, tragic look whenever she desperately searched for her deeply unfaithful ex-fiancé at crowded balls. A crushing, sickening realization violently hits her that Conrad always mysteriously vanished to secretly entertain another woman during those exact evasive moments. A dark, deeply painful suspicion rapidly takes root, completely convincing her that the famously popular Alexis actively harbors a secret, unpublicized lover. She forcefully recites the very first article of their strict marriage contract, violently forbidding any unnecessary, messy interference in personal affairs. She bitterly rationalizes his supposed secret infidelity, coldly acknowledging that a legendary man of his incredible status naturally attracts endless romantic attention. A heavy, suffocating melancholic resignation completely settles over her fragile heart as she strictly binds herself to their loveless, entirely pragmatic agreement. She fiercely resolves to entirely ignore his mysterious, highly suspicious disappearances, firmly locking away her completely unneeded and incredibly inappropriate curiosity. Time relentlessly drags on until the heavy manor doors finally swing open to dramatically reveal the exhausted, formidable lord's late evening return. Serafina warmly welcomes her enigmatic husband home, deeply troubled by the incredibly dark, dangerous brooding expression violently clouding his normally stoic face. Surprised by the sudden realization, she stammers out a quiet acknowledgement. The dedicated lady works earnestly to uncover the hidden secrets of the castle. Suspicion brews as she silently wonders if a secret lover is causing the sudden shift in his demeanor. Observing her relentless dedication, a silent observer notes that Serafina is a remarkably hard worker. Overjoyed despite their brief acquaintance, a deep sense of happiness blossoms within her. A sudden gasp escapes her lips as a startling realization takes hold. Struck by the profound weight of her gaze, Alexis realizes she is looking at him this way for the very first time. A heavy, pregnant silence fills the room as unspoken emotions linger in the air. Struggling to articulate his overwhelming emotions, he searches desperately for the right words. Masking his deep frustration, he offers a quiet, heartfelt note of gratitude. The quiet atmosphere shatters as they question the sudden arrival of a mysterious late-night visitor. Brushing past the tension, an eager voice apologizes for the wait and demands dinner immediately. Bursting into the room with chaotic energy, the newcomer loudly greets Johnson and Alexis. Stunned by the abrupt intrusion, Alexis stares at the uninvited guest in sheer disbelief. The loud intruder quickly shifts his piercing gaze toward the unfamiliar young lady standing nearby. Shocked by his brazen attitude, Serafina frantically wonders who this arrogant stranger could be. A tense beat of silence sweeps through the hall as the standoff continues. Annoyed by the sudden ambush, Alexis demands to know why Frederick showed up completely unannounced. Furious over being ignored, Frederick declares he traveled all this way because his relentless letters went unanswered. Confusion ripples through the room as the bizarre confrontation unfolds. Seizing control of the situation, Alexis firmly orders Frederick to step into the other room. Stranded alone, Serafina realizes Alexis isolated Frederick to hide a secret conversation from her. Gripped by uncertainty, she anxiously debates her next move while waiting outside the door. Panic sets in as she pieces together that this wild newcomer already knows about their unconsummated white marriage. Frederick's voice booms through the walls, shockingly confronting Alexis about his fake marriage. Deflecting the harsh accusation of being pitiful, Alexis attempts to redirect the heated argument. Fighting her burning curiosity, Serafina scolds herself for eavesdropping on their intense private dispute. Storming back into the room, Alexis apologizes to Serafina while Frederick indignantly denies being a nuisance. Exasperated by the chaos, Alexis brutally suggests that his obnoxious friend retake basic etiquette lessons. The explosive banter between the two men fills the room with an undeniable, fierce camaraderie. Watching their seamless interaction, Serafina is completely captivated by their dynamic energy. Observing the effortless teasing, she finally understands that these two are incredibly close friends. Stepping forward with elegant grace, Serafina introduces herself and asks if Frederick belongs to a great ducal house. Flashing a confident smile, Frederick formally introduces himself as Alexis's childhood friend and distant relative. Laughing off his immense prestige, Frederick reveals he is the third son of the legendary Hayward house. Alexis sighs in resignation, fully accepting Frederick's overwhelming and boisterous presence in his home. Diving straight into wild childhood tales, Frederick shocks Serafina with a story about them getting kidnapped. The sheer terror of the memory vividly flashes before her eyes as the past unfolds. Recounting the perilous escape, Frederick praises a young, fearless Alexis who bravely led the charge to freedom. Comforting a terrified companion during the ordeal, a young Alexis proves his unwavering courage in the face of danger. Remembering the past, the resolute image of a young Alexis taking command flashes vividly in her mind. Seeking confirmation, he turns and pointedly asks if he is right. Struck by sudden clarity, she realizes deeply that Alexis possesses a genuinely good heart. Reflecting on his character, she recalls his famously strong will forged even as a young child. Shattering the quiet atmosphere, he suddenly calls out Serafina's name. Caught completely off guard, she freezes in stunned silence. Panicking all of a sudden, she frantically debates her next move. Dark memories from that specific time begin to dangerously resurface in her mind. Recognizing his familiar habit when calling her name, a sudden wave of nostalgia hits her. The crushing weight of past suffering, despair, and misery violently rushes back to her. Overwhelmed by the flooding memories, she fights against the dark feelings that fiercely deny her true identity. Shaking off the gloom, she resolves that dwelling on the past disrespects Master Alexis. Despite her fierce resolution, a heavy sense of lingering hesitation remains firmly anchored in her heart. Gasping softly for air, she visibly struggles to suppress her rising, tumultuous emotions. Trembling slightly, she attempts to desperately regain her shattered composure. Fearing she will only make them worry needlessly, she realizes she must immediately look up to face them. Gathering her fragile courage, she finally raises her head to meet their waiting gaze. Shifting the heavy mood entirely, Alexis casually mentions that Frederick always hated nicknames. Explaining the quirk, Alexis notes that Frederick absolutely refuses the shorter version Fred, leaving her utterly confused as to why he brings this up now. Catching her off guard, Alexis suddenly turns and directly asks for Serafina's opinion. A sudden, brilliant realization sharply sparks within her racing mind. Grasping his profound kindness, she realizes he deliberately changed the subject to soothe her hidden worries. A soft, warm confirmation gently settles deep within her relieved heart. Radiating quiet gratitude, she silently appreciates his incredibly thoughtful gesture. Agreeing gently, she affirms his kind nature and notes that the shorter version rolls off the tongue easier. Absorbing her gentle response, Alexis calmly acknowledges her heartfelt answer. Bursting into the conversation, Frederick enthusiastically shouts his loud agreement. Seizing the perfect opportunity, Alexis smoothly asks if he can affectionately call her Sarah. A fluttering sense of pure joy blooms as she feels they have truly grown a little closer. Astonished by the intimacy, she reflects that Sarah stands as a nickname not even Master Conrad has ever used. Blushing deeply, she embraces the profound emotion brought by this new, personal nickname. Erupting in comical fury, Frederick loudly argues that their unshortened names carry noble meanings like guardian and peaceful lord. Watching the fiery outburst unfold, Alexis simply smirks at his childhood friend's dramatic antics. Later, surveying a vast pile of crafting materials, she thoughtfully wonders what she should make next. Humming quietly to herself, she ponders the creative possibilities of her upcoming project. Carefully examining her supplies, she closely inspects a solid block of wax. Making a firm decision, she decisively selects specific thread colors for her new crafting endeavor. Nodding with absolute determination, she readies her tools and prepares to finally begin the work. The bright morning sun rises high, signaling the vibrant dawn of a fresh new day. Bursting with infectious morning energy, a cheerful voice warmly invites her to take a boat out with everyone today. Surveying the peaceful morning, the silent atmosphere hums with an unspoken, thrilling anticipation. Smirking at his friend, Frederick mockingly questions why a newlywed like Alexis is choosing to work instead of celebrating. Startled by a sudden thud, Sarah nervously bites her lip as anxiety begins to cloud her racing mind. Turning toward her, Alexis firmly announces his morning departure for an important ordination ceremony at the town church. A wave of quiet disappointment washes over Sarah as she absorbs the sudden news of his departure. Glancing down, she tightly clutches the delicate handkerchief she spent all of yesterday painstakingly embroidering. Memories flood her mind as she recalls pouring deep gratitude into every single stitch for Lord Alexis. Spiraling into self-doubt, she violently crushes her own hopes, terrified that he might entirely reject her heartfelt gift. Panic grips her chest as she frantically worries he will find the sudden present incredibly strange and unwanted. Breaking her swirling thoughts, Frederick casually points out that staying cooped up inside the manor will only bore her. Flashing a charming smile, Frederick boldly suggests that the two of them venture out together for the day. Hesitating slightly, Sarah cautiously assumes he is simply offering pity so she will not be left completely alone. A sudden, suffocating dark aura completely engulfs the room as an unseen pressure bears down on them. Shivering violently, a thoroughly confused Frederick rubs his arms and loudly wonders if the room suddenly turned freezing cold. Piercing through the silence, a lethal, dagger-like glare locks directly onto the unsuspecting intruder. Sensing the immediate danger, a terrified Sarah nervously stammers as she realizes Alexis is radiating pure fury. Sweating bullets under the terrifying, silent wrath of his friend, Frederick finally comprehends the massive mistake he just made. The crushing silence stretches on as the intense, unbroken glare threatens to completely obliterate the cheerful mood. A heavy sigh finally slices through the thick tension, signaling a reluctant end to the suffocating standoff. Yielding to the overwhelming pressure, a panicked Frederick wildly fabricates an excuse and abruptly cancels his bold invitation. Shifting the focus entirely, a visiting priest cheerfully steps forward and eagerly invites Sarah to visit their welcoming church. Bowing respectfully, the earnest priest warmly congratulates the young countess on her beautiful new marriage. Smiling gracefully, Sarah graciously accepts his kind words and promises to visit the church in the future. Seizing the opening, the desperate priest aggressively recruits the countess to assist with their severely understaffed Sunday charity work. Slicing through the priest's relentless pitch, Alexis coldly orders the man to cease his aggressive solicitation immediately. The atmosphere violently snaps back into tense silence as the priest freezes in sheer terror at the Lord's icy command. Profusely apologizing for his extreme overstep, the trembling priest scurries away before Alexis bids his wife a gentle farewell. Watching his retreating back, a deeply dejected Sarah realizes her golden opportunity to deliver the gift has completely vanished. Alone in the quiet hall, she mournfully stares down at the unused, meticulously crafted cloth resting heavily in her hands. Shattering her quiet despair, Frederick suddenly reappears and warmly praises the stunning craftsmanship of her embroidered handkerchief. Bolstering her shattered confidence, Frederick adamantly insists that Alexis traveling to the capital for her proves his absolute devotion. A fragile spark of hope ignites within Sarah as she desperately asks if Alexis will genuinely treasure her handmade gift. Smiling with absolute certainty, Frederick reveals that the notoriously aloof lord has never been as fiercely captivated as he is right now. Embracing their unconventional white marriage, she desperately hopes her heartfelt gift will bring him genuine happiness. Uncovering a tragic past, she recalls that the sudden death of his parents completely shattered his world and birthed his icy persona. Analyzing his closely guarded demeanor, she realizes Alexis intentionally buries all painful memories of his deceased family. Visualizing the somber history, she pictures his parents resting eternally in the hillside graveyard after illness quickly claimed their lives. A heavy, suffocating silence sweeps across the quiet landscape as the devastating weight of past tragedies lingers unspoken. Staring into the cavernous halls of the massive estate, she painfully comprehends that his entire family bloodline is completely gone. Grappling with the immense scale of his absolute solitude, she helplessly admits her total inability to fathom his silent, crushing grief. Gazing intensely at the scenery, a quiet determination begins to slowly take root in her mind. Reflecting on her grim past, Sarah realizes she would still be living like a corpse if Alexis had not bravely rescued her. Refusing to remain a passive burden, she fiercely vows to stop simply taking everything in this contract marriage. Swelling with immense gratitude, she proudly acknowledges Alexis as her true, undeniable guardian. A silent, unwavering resolve hardens deeply within her heart as she contemplates her future. Scanning the grand estate, she desperately searches for a meaningful way to repay his immense kindness. Deep frustration suddenly grips her as she realizes she hasn't even managed to give him a simple handkerchief yet. Struck by a sudden thought, she realizes she has never actually seen a portrait of the previous count. A brilliant, inspiring idea suddenly flashes vibrantly across her racing mind. Clasping her hands together in pure excitement, she enthusiastically confirms her perfect new plan. Visualizing the beautiful masterpiece, she decides a woven portrait is the ultimate heartfelt gift. Bursting with fierce creative energy, she boldly plans to embroider a vibrant portrait of Alexis's parents in bright, soothing colors. Surging into immediate action, she declares her absolute first priority is to locate the original portrait. Recalling his barren, lonely private chamber, she deeply pities his severe lack of comforting personal belongings. Hoping to bring warmth to his desolate room, she firmly believes hanging a brightly colored portrait will finally soothe his hardened heart. Sprinting frantically through the sprawling castle corridors, she urgently seeks out the elusive painting. Confronting the head butler, she breathlessly asks Johnson why the late lord and lady's portrait isn't displayed prominently in the castle. Panting heavily after running 3 grueling laps around the massive castle, she utterly admits defeat in her exhausting search. Realizing Alexis deliberately skipped it during the tour, she suspiciously eyes the completely unvisited North Tower. Pausing his daily duties, the stoic Johnson calmly repeats her frantic inquiry about the late lord and lady's portrait. Pointing the way with precise direction, the butler reveals the painting strictly hangs hidden in the secluded North Tower. Raising a stern, warning finger, Johnson suddenly halts her immediate departure with a grave word of absolute caution. Brushing off her internal doubts, Sarah boldly reasons the marriage contract lists absolutely no forbidden areas for her to explore. Fixing her with an intense, deadly stare, Johnson absolutely forbids her from opening the specific drawer in the chest on the top floor. Pushing open the heavy, creaking doors, she nervously observes the visibly neglected and dusty interior of the forbidden tower. Creeping through the thick gloom, she confusedly questions why such important family portraits are banished to this ruined place. A dark, terrifying suspicion crosses her mind as she wonders if the family tragically failed to get along. Clinging for dear life, she carefully navigates the dangerously steep and treacherous tower stairs. Reaching the eerie summit, she finally steps cautiously into the hidden sanctuary of the mysterious top floor. Gazing into the quiet room, she is immediately captivated by the breathtakingly preserved portraits hanging silently before her. Shocked by the absolutely pristine condition, she realizes someone diligently tends to the fresh flowers every single day. Staring at the beautiful canvas, she softly whispers her profound admiration for the undeniably lovely couple. A profound wave of sorrow completely washes over her as she painfully imagines the heavy burden Alexis secretly carries. Picturing his lonely, daily pilgrimage to this hidden room, her fragile heart aches terribly for his silent suffering. Deeply moved by his hidden devotion, she understands that losing such precious parents must have completely shattered his world. A sudden, violent crack of thunder violently shatters the melancholic silence as a dark storm aggressively rolls in. Noticing the fierce rain rapidly lashing through the open window, she quickly rushes forward to securely close it. Reaching the wet windowsill, her wide eyes suddenly lock onto the exact forbidden drawer Johnson strictly warned her about. A freezing, furious voice suddenly slices through the cold air, completely paralyzing her in absolute terror. Whirling around in sheer horror, she finds a furious, terrifying Alexis glaring violently from the darkened doorway. Exploding onto the scene, the intricate cover art establishes the dramatic tone of the unfolding chapter. Gasping softly, Sarah freezes as a sudden, unspoken realization violently washes over her. Exasperated by the relentless banter, Alexis demands to know his friend's departure time, only for Frederick to teasingly threaten to stay forever. Dismissing his friend coldly, Alexis orders him home while Sarah quietly marvels at Frederick's dazzling resilience against the cruel remark. Breaking the tense silence, Sarah cautiously calls out to Master Alexis with a heavy heart. Regretting her sudden intrusion, she hesitantly presents the crafted gift as Alexis gently asks if it is meant for him. Stammering nervously under his gaze, she confesses her deep, forbidden desire to see his parents' hidden portraits. Gripping the embroidered cloth tightly, she reveals she meticulously captured their likenesses to give him a heartfelt gift. Bowing her head in utter shame, she frantically apologizes for overstepping her boundaries and acting so carelessly thoughtless. Realizing the devastating depth of his sorrow, she mentally chastises herself for painfully prodding at his raw, unhealed grief. Staring down with intense authority, Alexis strictly commands her to never again return to the old and dangerous tower. Shrouded in an overwhelmingly heavy silence, his piercing gaze reflects a deep, unspoken agony. Trembling with overwhelming emotion, Sarah desperately asks him why she is completely forbidden from understanding his hidden past. Shocked by her sudden, heartfelt tears, Alexis pauses as his harsh, icy demeanor completely shatters. Reaching out with unexpected tenderness, he gently brushes the falling tear from her cheek in a moment of pure, unguarded vulnerability. Restoring his stoic composure, Alexis quietly commands Sarah to leave and gently guides her away from the sorrowful room. Yielding softly to his undeniable request, Sarah helplessly observes the deeply troubled look still lingering in his eyes. Touched by his profound gentleness, she realizes he still intensely cares for her feelings despite his entirely justified anger. Shifting the scene entirely, the grand exterior architecture of the manor stands quietly against the passing time. Stepping lightly through the domain, Sarah peacefully navigates the vast, quiet halls of the sprawling estate. Descending the massive grand staircase, her rhythmic footsteps echo clearly through the otherwise empty corridor. Gliding gracefully forward into her routine, the calm atmosphere completely masks the underlying tension buried within the castle. Moving with quiet, diligent purpose, the tranquil day slowly unfolds gracefully within the protective manor walls. Marking the relentless passage of time, 3 quiet days seamlessly fade away since Sarah first arrived at the grand estate. Shattering the peaceful morning silence, a boisterous voice loudly demands to know if the lord of the manor is currently home. Sighing heavily at the sudden disruption, Alexis calmly notes that incoming sounds easily carry straight into the doorless library. Echoing aggressively through the open halls, the uninvited guest continues to cheerfully shout for immediate attention. Panicking wildly at the sudden intrusion, a frantic servant screams a bizarre excuse about feeding ducks before fleeing the scene. Stepping up with professional grace, Johnson calmly announces that Elsie formally requests an immediate audience with the master. Scowling darkly at the dreaded name, Alexis mercilessly orders his loyal butler to send the requesting woman away. Watching his dark, immediate reaction, Sarah carefully notes the intensely conflicted emotion raging across his hardened face. Reaching out with genuine concern, she gently whispers Master Alexis's name to ground him in the tense moment. Bursting into the room with chaotic energy, Elsie cheerfully introduces herself to Sarah as Lady Margaret's personal lady-in-waiting. Greeting the hyperactive girl politely, Sarah quickly recalls that the formidable Lady Margaret is Alexis's great-aunt. Questioning the sudden and explosive visit, Sarah prompts Elsie to excitedly declare she brings a special delivery straight from Lady Margaret. Peering deep into the open package, Elsie suddenly unleashes a terrified, blood-curdling shriek of absolute horror. Reading the attached letter aloud in a panic, she recites Lady Margaret's warm congratulations and the promise of a beautiful celebratory cake. Staring down into the desolate box, the grim reality of the completely ruined and chaotic contents silently sets in. Wailing in utter, dramatic confusion, Elsie stares at the unrecognizable mess and cries out that it was supposed to be a magnificent cake. A massive hand firmly grasps a squirming, spotted toad, triggering a confused observation that is immediately drowned out by a shrieking, disgusted demand to know why the grotesque creature is there. Staring at the unusual gift, they realize the strange offering is actually the great-aunt's unique blessing. Marveling at the vibrant colors of her first-ever toad, Sarah eagerly ponders what kind of yarn and stitch would best capture its warty texture. Defending the older woman's character, they admit with a sweat drop that she can indeed be a little bit mean. Tensions flare as accusations of cruelty toward a dying old woman clash with fierce defensiveness over tormenting his wife. Alexis insists the tea party must wait since Sarah just arrived, even as she excitedly plans to embroider leaves into her new design. Catching the tense atmosphere, Sarah softly interjects that she is perfectly available whenever needed. Glaring with lingering frustration, he vows that the meddling woman will visit only after things have finally settled down. Turning his attention back, Alexis decides to reveal the complicated history surrounding his formidable great-aunt. Sensing his hesitation, Sarah earnestly asks if Alexis truly wishes to avoid seeing his own flesh and blood. He recounts how great-aunt Margaret rejected noble heirs for love, marrying a wealthy merchant before tragically losing her husband to an accident. Alexis gratefully admits that her fierce protection and guidance allowed the estate to flourish against scheming nobles after his parents perished. Abandoning her high-ranking merchant position, Margaret sacrificed everything to ruthlessly forge him into the next count. Despite her dedication, Alexis admits with a heavy sigh that her intense training methods were highly problematic. Sarah recoils in horror upon learning the Spartan woman forced a 5-year-old Alexis to brutally brawl with company guards daily. Recalling his childhood with grim irony, he notes she forced him to ingest lethal poisons to build resistance. Fearing for Sarah's safety, Alexis vows to protect her while admitting he cannot predict his aunt's wild schemes. Brimming with sudden determination, Sarah accepts the dangerous challenge with a bright, fearless smile. Guilt washes over Sarah as she realizes Alexis avoided his beloved aunt entirely for her sake. Pumping herself up, Sarah boldly declares her own resilience and assures him she can handle anything. Alexis smiles softly, genuinely reassured by his new wife's unshakable optimism. Drawing strength from her recent hardships, Sarah confidently proclaims that having survived hell, mere words cannot faze her. Alexis apologizes for the shocking revelations, admitting he should have been entirely transparent from the beginning. Sarah bows her head in sudden apology, regretting her impulsive actions from the other day. Eager to please, Alexis warmly welcomes her to utilize the sewing room and explore the entire estate at her leisure. Heart pounding with anticipation, Sarah realizes the perfect moment to present her secret gift has finally arrived. Stuttering through her intense nervousness, she fumbles to pull the item from her pocket. Thrusting the fabric forward, she shyly reveals a handkerchief she immediately embroidered in the sewing room. Blushing fiercely, Sarah struggles to find the right words as the silence stretches between them. Burning with sheer embarrassment, she mentally begs her blazing fever to vanish instantly. Alexis stares at the embroidered handkerchief in stunned, breathless silence as time seems to stand still. Breaking the silence, Alexis softly asks for confirmation that this beautiful gift is truly meant for him. With profound gratitude etched across his handsome features, Alexis accepts the handkerchief. The delicate embroidery rests gently in his large hands, radiating a profound warmth between the two. Gazing at the intricate stitches, he offers a gentle, awestruck compliment regarding her exceptional talent. A soft, breathtaking smile breaks across Alexis's usually stoic face, melting the tension in the room. Shocked by the devastatingly handsome smile, Sarah clutches her chest in overwhelming fluster. Utterly charmed, Sarah realizes the rumors of the terrifying Ice Count couldn't be further from the truth. Captivated by his rare, tender expression, Sarah finds herself completely unable to tear her eyes away from his face. Suddenly, a frantic servant bursts in, shouting about an urgent message that forces the Lord to visit the castle. Despite the sudden interruption, Sarah remains wrapped in the lingering memory of his smile, feeling as warm as spring sunshine. Startled by the sudden report regarding the contents of 12.pdf, he instantly processes the unexpected information. Determined to handle the situation personally, he boldly declares his intention to meet with the man face to face. Realizing the underlying truth, he acknowledges that the man genuinely cares for his great-aunt despite his rough exterior. Sighing heavily at the logistics, he instructs his servant to schedule a visit for tomorrow to spare the man a steep climb. Glancing back with a hint of regret, he reflects on his failed attempt to invite Frederick along for the tedious journey. Looming in the distance, the grand and imposing estate of Lady Margaret finally comes into full view. Shivering at the terrifying thought of her bizarre collection, Frederick nervously declines the invitation to join them. Hoping for a peaceful common interest, Sarah optimistically imagines they might bond over a shared love for embroidery. Stepping bravely through the grand gates, the young couple braces themselves for the unpredictable encounter ahead. Greeting them with overwhelming energy, an attendant eagerly directs the couple inside to meet the waiting lady. Catching a horrifying glimpse of the rumored collection, Sarah frantically tries to convince herself her eyes are playing cruel tricks. Smirking sharply from her seat, Lady Margaret Stapleton mockingly notes that she expected Alexis to lock his precious bride away. Stepping forward with respectful formality, Alexis introduces his new wife, who politely asks to be called Sarah. Bowing with graceful elegance, Sarah offers her sincere gratitude for the invitation to the grand estate. Gesturing with surprising warmth, Lady Margaret officially welcomes Sarah and invites her to take a comfortable seat. Settling into the distinctly tense atmosphere, the small group silently prepares for the tea party to officially commence. Bursting into the room with frantic apologies, an anxious servant scrambles to serve the severely delayed tea. Stumbling over her own feet, the clumsy maid suddenly loses her balance while carrying the scalding teapot. Tumbling forward in horrifying slow motion, the maid desperately attempts to keep the hot tea from splashing onto the noble guests. Springing into immediate action, Alexis shields Sarah while the terrified Elsie profusely apologizes for the dangerous spill. Screaming in sudden, piercing shock, Elsie reacts violently to the chaotic mess unfolding around her. Leaping swiftly to his feet, Alexis quickly assesses the disastrous aftermath of the ruined tea party. Observing the chaotic scene with dry amusement, Lady Margaret remarks on how lovely it is to see the couple getting along so well. Wiping away the spilled tea in awkward silence, the couple endures the lingering embarrassment of the ruined moment. Whispering with careless volume, a servant thoughtlessly blurts out that his lordship only ever had eyes for a woman named Lady Rosie. Stunned by the completely unfamiliar name, Sarah sharply questions who this mysterious Lady Rosie could possibly be. Freezing instantly in place, the atmosphere in the elegant room drops to an absolutely chilling temperature. Processing the shocking revelation, Sarah internally wonders if this unknown woman is her new husband's secret lover. Sensing the rapidly mounting tension, Alexis abruptly excuses himself from the gathering with a stiff, hasty apology. Explaining his sudden departure without missing a beat, Lady Margaret casually mentions that Lady Rosie has fallen ill once more. Sighing in vocal disappointment, Margaret loudly remarks that Alexis remains completely devoted to his old flame despite his recent marriage. Shifting her sharp attention back, Margaret casually encourages a shell-shocked Sarah to stay behind and rest a while. Slamming the heavy wooden door forcefully behind him, Alexis leaves the room steeped in a suffocating silence. Absorbing the harsh, undeniable truth, Sarah resolves to quickly change the uncomfortable subject to save her own pride. Barking out swift orders, the head maid scrambles to redirect the panicked Elsie back to her immediate cleaning duties. Piecing the cruel clues together, Sarah logically concludes that this mysterious Lady Rosie must be his openly acknowledged lover. Rationalizing the painful situation, Sarah figures their vast difference in social status forced Alexis into a political marriage with her instead. Shrugging off the bitter sting of rejection, Sarah reminds herself that she always knew this convenient marriage came with hidden circumstances. Hardening her fragile heart, she pragmatically accepts that their union is entirely devoid of love and strictly based on aligned interests. Trailing off in quiet, heartbreaking sorrow, Sarah feels an undeniable pang of sadness despite her flawless logical reasoning. Sarah resigns herself to the harsh reality that their union is merely a convenient, loveless, white marriage. Surprised by the intricate design, Lady Margaret asks Sarah if she personally embroidered the handkerchief featuring the child's pattern. Sarah hesitates in tense silence, internally questioning why the imposing woman is suddenly showing such keen interest. An undeniable tension hangs heavy in the quiet room as the two women carefully study each other. Confirming her deep love for the craft, Sarah shyly admits she has completed several other beautifully embroidered pieces. Examining the delicate fabric closely, Lady Margaret gasps in genuine admiration at Sarah's truly exceptional skill. Sarah eagerly agrees without hesitation when the older woman warmly requests a custom-embroidered handkerchief of her own. Deciding it is much safer to bite her tongue, Sarah wisely ignores Margaret's ominous mention of boiling something unknown. Lady Margaret chillingly confesses she prefers hands-on work like boiling things in heavy pots over delicate embroidery. Taking a deep breath, Sarah realizes her surprisingly pleasant conversation with Lady Margaret actually calmed her racing nerves. Sarah struggles to recall a specific, potentially pathetic rumor she recently heard floating around the royal capital. A sudden realization strikes her as she remembers the recent gossip about her spreading through the bustling capital. Unbelievably, rumors wildly praised the seamstress lady's phenomenal embroidery skills as the absolute talk of the entire town. Clapping her hands in sudden clarity, she fully pieces together the amazing rumor circulating about her exceptional talents. Flustered by the immense praise, Sarah heavily doubts that her perfectly ordinary embroidery could genuinely captivate the vast capital. She pulls out the secret, intricate project she had been tirelessly crafting behind Master Alexis's back. When asked about her current work, Sarah shyly reveals her ongoing project with a hesitant, embarrassed smile. Margaret excitedly envisions how remarkably dashing Alexis would look wearing such a magnificent piece on the chaotic battlefield. Completely blown away by the incredible craftsmanship, the lady boldly declares it perfectly justifies Sarah's stellar reputation. Deeply insecure, Sarah fears she looks incredibly pathetic pouring so much devoted effort into a gift for her sham husband. A profound sense of misery suddenly washes over her as the bitter reality of her situation fully sets in. Crushing her fragile hopes, a servant casually mentions that Master Alexis still has not returned from Lady Rosie's estate. Frederick animatedly recounts how Alexis's legendary solo victory over a giant troll cemented his status as a master swordsman. Having watched his brother's grueling training for years, Frederick gratefully accepts his easier life as the third son. Sarah notices Frederick's sudden shift in demeanor and softly calls out his name in deep concern. A heavy, melancholic silence abruptly swallows the once lively conversation as Frederick looks away in quiet contemplation. Brushing off her growing worry, Frederick claims he is simply tired and apologizes for his sudden, unusual quietness. Accepting his polite excuse, Sarah bids him a quiet good night as the heavy evening finally draws to a close. Left entirely alone with her racing thoughts, Sarah silently stews in the quiet, oppressive darkness of her room. Her mind continuously drifts back to Master Alexis and the painful mysteries surrounding his lengthy absence. Sarah desperately wonders why the mere mention of Master Alexis instantly triggered such a strange, uncomfortable reaction from Frederick. Wide awake with swirling anxieties, she questions if he truly loves her while debating whether she should wait up. The quiet emptiness of the grand estate amplifies her profound sense of isolation and creeping heartbreak. Gazing longingly into the distance, she sadly asks if she is truly forbidden from cherishing her fragile, foolish hopes. Margaret eagerly offers to share embarrassing childhood photos of Alexis, completely ignoring his swift, absolute refusal. Highly defensive, Alexis firmly insists he absolutely refuses to show his new wife such undignified images from his youth. Pushing back against his fierce stubbornness, Sarah excitedly pleads to see the adorable face he is currently making. Glaring down with a dark, menacing expression, Alexis attempts to intimidate her with a truly terrifying scowl. Catching herself slipping into a pleasant fantasy, Sarah realizes she may have foolishly gotten the wrong idea about him. Splashing cold water on her flushed face, she stubbornly lies to herself that his visit to Rosie's place does not matter. Sarah realizes with a sinking heart that Alexis didn't return home until the early morning hours. Remembering her previously broken engagement, Sarah sternly resolves never to fall in love again. She forcefully crushes her fleeting, desperate hope that Alexis might actually harbor a little affection for her. Steeling her fragile resolve, Sarah convinces herself she can easily continue playing the role of a convenient wife. Exhausted but determined, she rises from her bed to face the incredibly difficult day ahead. Startled by a sudden, unexpected noise, Sarah abruptly turns her head toward the doorway. Alexis bursts into the room, his eyes instantly widening in pure shock at her completely disheveled appearance. Rushing frantically to her side, Alexis immediately senses that something is terribly wrong with his new wife. Demanding an urgent explanation for her terrible state, Alexis is met only with Sarah's timid, hesitant welcome home. Assuming the absolute worst, Alexis fiercely demands to know if his great-aunt said something cruel to her. Frantic with escalating worry, he practically begs to know why she looks so utterly exhausted and terrible. Sarah quickly defends Lady Margaret's surprising kindness before tearfully admitting she couldn't sleep because she was thinking about him. Struggling miserably to maintain her composure, Sarah fights back the painful rationalizations swirling violently in her mind. Desperately clinging to her crumbling emotional defenses, she silently repeats her strict vow never to fall in love again. Catching her mumbled, heartbroken words, Alexis confusedly asks if something happened to his younger sister, Rosie. Sarah freezes in absolute shock as the massive revelation about Rosie's true identity completely shatters her previous misunderstanding. Unable to suppress her lingering heartache, Sarah softly and hesitantly questions him about the mysterious Lady Rosie. Stuttering in wild disbelief, Sarah finally confirms that his supposed lover is actually his little sister. Alexis pieces the ridiculous clues together, realizing in astonishment that Sarah lost sleep purely out of raging jealousy. Sighing heavily in sheer exasperation, Alexis questions if his formidable great-aunt deliberately left out the crucial context. Guilt washing over him, Alexis openly admits he should have explained everything himself from the very beginning. Processing her intense, unexpected jealousy, Alexis suddenly realizes the profound and shocking implications of Sarah's deeply hidden feelings. Overwhelmed by the sudden, blazing realization of her genuine affection, Alexis flushes deeply in pure shock. A heavy, intensely blushing silence falls between the two as the monumental misunderstanding finally clears the air. Sarah covers her face in burning embarrassment, instantly regretting how completely she misjudged the entire dramatic situation. Stuttering uselessly, Sarah utterly fails to formulate a coherent response to his sudden, intense realization. Alexis gently apologizes for not explaining the long, tragically complicated story about Rosie much sooner. Blushing furiously, Sarah meekly confesses that she mistakenly believed Rosie was another beautiful woman in his life. Exhausted by the immense emotional roller coaster, Sarah collapses back into bed and sleeps peacefully until nearly noon. Waking up entirely refreshed, Sarah is deeply relieved to hear that Frederick has also recovered from his strange mood. Finally relaxed and safe, Sarah is suddenly hit by intense hunger while the others loudly marvel at her glowing face. Sitting down together, Alexis officially and solemnly introduces the difficult topic of his younger sister, Rosemary Middleton. He sadly explains that his 10-year-old sister has been tragically bedridden with a severe illness since last year. A dark shadow falls over his eyes as he quietly reveals their parents perished from the exact same fatal illness. Alexis grimly clarifies that while the horrible disease isn't contagious, there is absolutely no hope of a medical recovery. Heartbroken by his stoic, matter-of-fact tone, Sarah softly apologizes for her complete and utter ignorance regarding his family. Alexis explains they moved Rosie to a sunny villa near the castle to provide a much better healing environment. Sarah's heart aches terribly for Alexis, completely unable to fathom the agony of losing his parents and watching his sister suffer. Alexis sincerely apologizes for hiding the painful truth, but Sarah quickly and warmly assures him not to worry. Eager to support her new family, Sarah brightly asks for permission to visit Rosie and bring her a special gift. Recognizing the unmistakable sorrow he desperately tries to hold back, Sarah watches him with deep empathy. Filled with quiet gratitude, Alexis sincerely thanks Sarah for her profound understanding. Suddenly, a demanding letter from the 8th Ward Duchy forces Master Frederick to return home for a family dinner immediately. Scolding Alexis for constantly spoiling Rosie, Frederick points out how the young girl throws terrible tantrums whenever he leaves. Dodging the direct question, Alexis defensively justifies his gentle actions as mere bravado. Brushing off any lingering melancholy, Frederick confidently promises to visit them again very soon. Glaring sternly, Frederick firmly warns Alexis never to make Sarah sad and to see his white marriage through to the very end. Pausing before his departure, Frederick sharply raises his hand to add one final piece of stern advice. Deeply moved by his fierce protectiveness, Sarah softly thanks Master Frederick for his overwhelming kindness. A quiet moment passes between them as the heavy weight of his departing words settles completely into the air. Scowling in mild annoyance, Alexis stubbornly mutters that he already knows his marital duties without being told. Listening to his booming voice, Sarah exasperatedly wonders if he is deliberately shouting just so she can hear him. Processing the loud exchange, Sarah reflects quietly on the highly unusual bond between the two contrasting men. Smiling softly, she realizes that Master Frederick truly acts like a fiercely protective older brother to a stubborn Alexis. A warm sense of relief washes over Sarah as she sees how deeply the two men genuinely care for one another. Setting off on their journey, a grand carriage makes its way toward the sunny, secluded villa where Rosie currently resides. Approaching the tranquil estate, they observe a peaceful, quiet environment that perfectly suits a recovering medical patient. The magnificent architecture of the sprawling, highly detailed villa stands proudly against the bright and clear skies. Entering the bright room, Alexis gently asks a bedridden Rosie exactly how she is feeling today. Resting fragilely in her plush bed, the sickly young girl looks up at her royal visitors with wide, curious eyes. Greeting her beloved brother, Rosie immediately shifts her eager gaze toward the completely unfamiliar woman standing beside him. Utterly captivated, Rosie gazes at Sarah in pure awe and wildly praises her incredibly refined elegance. Bowing gracefully, Sarah formally introduces herself to the deeply astonished and highly excited young girl. Suddenly flushing with burning embarrassment, Rosie softly apologizes for her intensely eager and unladylike staring. An awkward but highly endearing silence fills the bright bedroom as the two brand new sisters-in-law curiously size each other up. Gasping violently into a sudden coughing fit, Rosie is quickly urged by a panicked Alexis to calm down and rest. Recovering her precious breath, Rosie beams brightly and expresses her absolute deepest gratitude for the wonderful visit. Stepping forward with a warm smile, Sarah presents a beautifully wrapped gift as a wonderful token of their brand new acquaintance. Unwrapping the present to reveal an adorable embroidery, Rosie squeals in sheer delight at the magnificent craftsmanship. Marveling at the highly intricate stitches, Rosie wildly praises Sarah for possessing the ultimate hallmark of a true noble lady. Glancing up with a shy, highly hopeful expression, Rosie hesitates slightly before finally voicing her absolute deepest desire. Clasping her small hands together pleadingly, Rosie begs Sarah to teach her the incredibly beautiful art of embroidery. Smiling tenderly, Sarah promises she would be absolutely delighted to teach Rosie once she fully recovers her fragile health. Pouting adorably at the slight delay, Rosie visibly deflates at not being able to magically start her exciting lessons immediately. Stepping in firmly, Alexis sternly scolds his little sister and loudly orders her not to cause any unnecessary trouble for Sarah. Seeking to quickly lift the girl's spirits, Sarah excitedly promises to climb the beautiful mountains of Shiafield together. Thrilled by the highly adventurous prospect, Rosie eagerly accepts the exciting, action-packed future promise. Brimming with sudden, intense confidence, Rosie proudly declares that she shall absolutely act as Sarah's personal mountain guide. Boasting brightly, Rosie claims she successfully scaled the massive, towering summit when she was only 5 years old. Snorting loudly, Alexis mercilessly shatters her proud illusion by brutally reminding her he carried her for the entire final third. Rosie formally declares her commitment to ladylike training, prompting Sarah to playfully question her stiffness. Sarah gently reminds Rosie that their new familial bond renders such strict formalities entirely unnecessary. Halting their departure, Sarah smoothly requests a moment to take Rosie's measurements. Overjoyed by the prospect of a new dress, Rosie beams as Sarah promises to sew her something truly magnificent. anticipation fills the air as the two share a warm, unspoken moment of connection. An older gentleman warmly observes Rosie's immediate affection for Sarah, expressing deep gratitude for their blooming friendship. A somber silence descends as the cheerful atmosphere subtly shifts toward melancholy. The man's voice drops into a heavy sigh, signaling a painful transition in his thoughts. He wistfully recalls the bright, sweet child racing vibrantly through the sunlit gardens just last year. The crushing weight of Rosie's present condition hangs heavily in the quiet room. Despair shadows his face as he questions the cruel reality of her seemingly incurable illness. Frustration radiates from his tense posture as he admits his complete powerlessness to help the ailing girl. Refusing to succumb to despair, Sarah boldly interrupts the sorrowful silence. Determination ignites within Sarah as she realizes her embroidery stands as her sole weapon against the gloom. Swiftly turning to Johnson, Sarah decisively orders new materials to fuel her humble craft. She pours her entire soul into the needles, desperately hoping to spark even a flicker of joy. Sarah stitches with fierce devotion, resolved to craft a garment capable of restoring their lost smiles. Clad in an explosion of vibrant frills, Rosie gleefully twirls and showers Miss Sarah with ecstatic gratitude. The gentleman marvels at the beautiful dress, noting a miraculous return of healthy color to Rosie's cheeks. An unprecedented wave of pure happiness washes over Sarah as she witnesses the profound impact of her handiwork. Peace settles over the household, temporarily masking the looming threats outside their walls. Alexis shatters the tranquility, urgently announcing the immediate deployment of a subjugation force to intercept border-attacking monsters. The gravity of the impending military campaign casts a sudden, tense shadow over the room. Apologizing for his sudden departure, Alexis gently urges Sarah to remain vigilant in his absence. He grimly outlines the massive scale of the impending clash, noting the mobilization of multiple royal capital knight orders. Alexis casually mentions the inclusion of the Viscount's son, young Master Dexter, among the deploying ranks. He highlights Dexter's pristine reputation as the miracle knight, safely positioned in the rear guard away from the slaughter. Offering a reassuring smile, Alexis advises Sarah to banish any unnecessary worries from her mind. Sarah briefly processes the mention of Master Dexter, turning the unfamiliar name over in her head. Dismissing Dexter completely, Sarah bluntly admits the Viscount's son hadn't even crossed her mind. Shifting her focus entirely, Sarah zeroes in on the true source of her mounting anxiety. She logically rationalizes Master Conrad's safety, knowing Miriam's magic transfer provides him an impenetrable shield. A silent beat emphasizes the glaring vulnerability separating Alexis from his magically supported peers. Alexis attempts to deflect her concern, insisting she needn't trouble herself with such tactical matters. Panic edges into Sarah's voice as she confronts the terrifying possibility of Alexis depleting his magic reserves mid-battle. Guilt crushes Sarah as she tearfully apologizes for lacking the magical essence needed to fortify Master Alexis. Brushing aside her apologies, Alexis tenderly requests a physical memento to anchor him during his upcoming absence on the battlefield. A profound, wordless vow seals their parting, binding their hearts across the impending war zone. Overwhelmed by a sudden revelation, a breathless voice gasps in awe, crying out, "It's almost like hiss." Oh! A sudden, echoing stillness crashes over the scene, leaving behind only the tense silence of a fading beat. Hesitantly admitting the shocking truth of their situation, she nervously reveals to her companions that they are actually a real married couple. A tense, echoing silence crashes over the scene as the heavy weight of her sudden confession lingers in the air. The quiet atmosphere thickens, building sharp anticipation as unspoken emotions swirl fiercely between the unmoving figures. Despite Lord Frederick's earlier praise for the gift, heavy doubt continues to gnaw mercilessly at her racing mind. She reflects on the ornate sash, a traditional knight's garment embroidered with a family crest and presented by lovers as a desperate prayer for a safe return. Cold rejection stings her memory as she vividly recalls him aggressively returning the item because he simply didn't need it. The crushing emotional weight of his past refusal leaves a bitter, devastating silence in its immediate wake. Anxiously rationalizing the painful failure, she assumes that gifting such an intimate sash was simply too much for a purely white marriage. Resignation washes over her trembling form as she bitterly accepts the deeply painful truth she always knew deep down. A heavy, melancholic quiet settles oppressively over her drooping, utterly defeated figure. Standing completely motionless, she finds herself hopelessly lost in a violent whirlpool of conflicting, unvoiced emotions. The stifling atmosphere suddenly shifts, hinting at an unexpected and dramatic turn in her turbulent inner turmoil. Bursting with enthusiastic praise, a loud voice shatters the tension by marveling at how incredibly well the garment suits him. A striking visual freezes time, capturing the sheer, heart-pounding impact of this entirely unexpected compliment. The two figures lock eyes in a prolonged, breathless exchange that completely electrifies the silent room. Radiant warmth floods the quiet scene as long-buried, unspoken romantic feelings begin to frantically surface. With gentle, overwhelming sincerity, he finally offers his heartfelt and long-awaited thanks to a stunned Sarah. A soft, tender stillness envelopes the breathless couple as they share a profoundly intimate moment of connection. As he bids her farewell and firmly promises to return, a flustered Sarah is left entirely unsure of what to do next. Overwhelmed by a rushing tide of emotion, she realizes with a massive shock that she has broken her solemn oath. Surrendering completely to her racing heart, Sarah breathlessly admits to herself that she has undeniably fallen in love with Master Alexis. Time marches forward relentlessly, marking 3 agonizing weeks since Alexis departed for the blood-soaked front lines. A cheerful servant joyfully interrupts the day, beaming with bright gratitude and announcing to Lady Sarah that she is finally feeling much better. Snapped violently out of her deep reverie by the sudden voice, Sarah blinks in utter surprise when her name is called. Her frantic mind remains visibly distracted, with her worried thoughts drifting far beyond the safe walls of the Grand Manor. Staring blankly into the distance, she constantly tortures herself wondering where Alexis is and if he is commanding his troops well. A sudden pang of desperate, agonizing worry grips her chest as she prays fervently that her husband hasn't been hurt in battle. The undeniable, overwhelming truth of her consuming love for Alexis echoes loudly through her painfully lovesick mind. Channeling her frantic nervous energy into her hands, she suddenly realizes she has produced a massive, towering mountain of embroidery. Completely consumed by her surging feelings, she catches herself obsessing over Alexis yet again without a single moment's rest. Taking Lady Margaret's highly practical advice, she decisively opts to donate her overflowing, frantic crafts to the local charity bazaar. Astonishing rumors rapidly ignite among the commoners as they excitedly claim her intricate embroidery possesses miraculous, undeniable healing properties. The wild, uncontrollable gossip explodes across town, with ecstatic people fiercely believing her magical creations can actually ward off evil spirits. Mortified by the wildly escalating situation and clutching her stomach, she dreads facing Alexis and fears being dubbed the ridiculous seamstress wife. Despite her intense, burning embarrassment, she finds deep solace in the undeniable fact that Rosie feels perfectly healthy once again. Resigning herself completely to her bizarre new fate, she helplessly accepts her accidental, widespread title as the famous seamstress lady. Bewildered and aggressively denying any magical abilities, she helplessly recalls her past, ordinary donations back in the royal capital. Shifting to a heartwarming domestic scene, a joyful voice expresses deep, pure happiness about sharing sweet daily meals together. A caring, gentle voice firmly insists that she must eat properly and avoid overexerting herself during her delicate, ongoing recovery. The chapter concludes with a quiet, lingering moment of peaceful domestic warmth that beautifully seals the emotional journey. Bursting with sudden enthusiasm, a cheerful voice excitedly wonders if something wonderful has finally happened. Arriving back at the grand estate, Milady is warmly greeted by her fiercely loyal servants. Showering her creations with praise, the ecstatic staff completely believe her beautiful embroidery possesses magical powers to ward off evil. Brushing off her lady-in-waiting Claire's overly generous praise, she completely doubts her crafts will spark a massive bidding war at the upcoming charity bazaar. Fueling the miraculous rumors, another servant cheerfully claims that wearing her gifted necktie instantly cured his stiff shoulders. Rejecting her maid's frantic pleas to rest, the determined lady fiercely vows to create even more magical accessories for everyone. Collapsing into a soft heap with a heavy thud, she worriedly reflects on the brewing chaos beyond a mere scolding. Panicking intensely, the terrified maids desperately warn that if anything happens to her delicate health, the normally kind Master Alexis will undoubtedly punish them. Despite secretly knowing her embroidery lacks any actual magic, she joyfully resolves to sew endlessly as long as it brings her people true happiness. A bright, adorable smile flashes across a young girl's face as she joyously declares that Sister Sarah makes the absolute best dresses. Filled with immense warmth, Sarah happily notes that sweet Rosie proudly wears her beautifully handcrafted dresses every single day. Realizing that the formerly bedridden Rosie has completely outgrown her wardrobe, Sarah urgently prepares to craft a new outfit for her upcoming outing. Desperate to prevent Rosie from being laughed at, Sarah anxiously decides to seek expert advice to avoid designing something overly strange. The tense, heavy silence lingers powerfully as Sarah deeply contemplates her next bold move to perfect the crucial dress design. Suddenly snapping out of her intense focus, someone urgently shouts that they cannot possibly step away from their current chaotic task. Pausing nervously amidst the frantic commotion, Sarah heavily questions whether she is relying entirely too much on Lady Margaret's invaluable guidance. An explosive boom violently rocks the estate as a furious voice yells at a tearful Elsie for completely ruining the dangerous gunpowder measurements. Thick, suffocating smoke billows dramatically through the chaotic hallway in the terrifying aftermath of the sudden, massive explosion. Staring in absolute shock, Sarah freezes entirely as the deafening destruction forcefully interrupts her peaceful sewing plans. Emerging calmly from the lingering smoke, a composed voice politely apologizes for the intense delay while quickly checking if everyone survived the blast. Brushing off the explosive chaos, the elegant woman proudly announces that Sarah's dazzling accessories have triggered a massive, high-demand order from the church. Chuckling wickedly at the lively situation, she marvels at the incredible power of forcing a haughty old bat to become deeply indebted to them. Shifting her sharp focus back to the pressing design issue, Margaret thoughtfully suggests crafting an enchanting embroidery of the moon and stars. Relieved by the sudden flash of inspiration, Sarah admits her bitter struggle with the design before pivoting excitedly back to Rosie's special dress. Visualizing the final masterpiece, Margaret decisively states that a deep navy blue fabric will make the brilliant celestial patterns aggressively pop. Thrilled by the wildly original concept, Sarah eagerly agrees that an elegant crystal necklace will flawlessly complement Rosie's luminous complexion. A bright spark of brilliant creativity flashes in her eyes as the stunning, completed outfit finally takes perfect shape in her racing mind. Imagining the heartwarming scene, she visualizes a joyous Rosie wearing the magical dress like an adorable little witch bravely heading to a grand ball. Overwhelmed by sheer artistic triumph, she clutches the beautiful designs while declaring the magnificent concept an absolute, resounding success. Empowered by her soaring inspiration, Sarah immediately dives back into her fierce, unstoppable sewing frenzy with renewed passion. Her nimble fingers fly across the delicate fabric at breakneck speed as the gorgeous stellar patterns rapidly begin to materialize. Pushing herself to the absolute physical limit, she works relentlessly through the quiet hours to perfectly execute the demanding, intricate design. The gorgeous, finished garment finally rests majestically in the dimly lit room, radiating an almost magical aura of pure, concentrated love. Exhausted but deeply satisfied, her heavy eyelids flutter aggressively as the immense physical toll of her marathon sewing session finally hits her. Surrendering completely to her overwhelming fatigue, she slumps forward uncontrollably and drifts into a deep, dreamless slumber right at her cluttered desk. The peaceful silence of the tranquil room slowly wraps around her deeply resting form, heavily contrasting the violent explosive chaos from earlier. Gentle moonlight spills softly across the silent chamber, beautifully illuminating the stunningly completed witch dress waiting eagerly for the morning light. Dreaming of a brighter future, she fiercely hopes that her speedy recovery will powerfully impress Master Alexis the very moment he bravely returns. Waking with a sudden jolt of intense guilt, she firmly resolves to sleep properly in her bed to avoid needlessly terrifying her fiercely loyal servants again. Gazing desperately into the quiet night, she whispers a final, fervent prayer for Master Alexis to safely return from the blood-soaked front lines. 1 month into the brutal campaign, Sarah yearns deeply for her husband's safe return from the blood-soaked front lines. The long-awaited moment finally arrives as the exhausted, victorious troops slowly approach the grand estate. The joyous household staff warmly welcomes a weary Master Alexis back from the terrifying horrors of war. Alexis stands silently in the bustling grand hall, bearing the heavy, undeniable exhaustion of relentless combat. Gazing affectionately at her returning husband, Sarah quietly takes in his striking, battle-worn appearance. Observing the heavily stained and torn uniforms, she suddenly realizes the sheer brutality of their recent, bloody clashes. Noticing her beautiful attire, Alexis quietly marvels to himself that she is actually wearing the special dress. A tender, electric silence stretches between the longing couple as their eyes finally lock after a grueling separation. Breaking the heavy, emotionally charged quiet, Alexis gently and warmly calls out Sarah's name. Startled by his uncharacteristically soft voice, she looks up with wide, breathtakingly anticipatory eyes. Stepping smoothly closer, he tenderly requests to get a much better look at her undeniably beautiful face. The chaotic world completely fades away as they share an intensely intimate, unbroken romantic gaze. Reaching out with surprising gentleness, he flawlessly closes the remaining physical distance between their trembling bodies. Flustered by his sudden, overwhelming closeness, a breathless gasp quickly escapes her slightly parted lips. Gazing deeply into her sparkling eyes, he earnestly confesses that she looks even more beautiful than he ever remembered. Blushing deeply, Sarah expresses her immense relief at his safe return while the ecstatic staff cheer triumphantly in the background. Dismissing his smooth flattery, she tearfully admits her absolute biggest concern was simply that he remained totally unhurt. A sudden, heavy hesitation violently interrupts his calm response as a dark shadow crosses his exhausted features. Quickly recovering his composure, he firmly credits her handcrafted sash for miraculously protecting his men against a terrifying monster horde. Despite his strong reassurances, Sarah frantically wonders if he is secretly hiding a severe, unseen injury beneath his heavy armor. Catching the undeniable, lingering hesitation in his deep voice, her romantic anxiety violently spikes into pure dread. Alexis solemnly reveals the horrifying news that Master Conrad, Viscount Dexter's son, was brutally attacked by a savage ogre. Riddled with agonizing guilt, Alexis admits he witnessed the devastating attack but was completely trapped in heavy, inescapable combat. Offering a small, desperate sliver of comfort, he quickly assures his terrified wife that Conrad's severe wounds do not appear immediately fatal. Lowering his heavy head in deep shame, he issues a heartbreaking, whispered apology for tragically failing his noble comrade. Respecting her close connection to the injured knight, Alexis gently grants her full permission to formally visit the recovering Conrad. Stunned by the horrifying, unexpected news, Sarah violently struggles to process the unforgiving reality of the brutal battlefield. She reflects in utter, shattered disbelief, remembering Conrad fiercely as the legendary Knight of Miracles, who never sustained injuries. The shocking revelation that such an invincible warrior was violently forced off the front lines severely rattles her very core. Reflecting on what Master Conrad and Miriam would prefer, she gently decides that writing a heartfelt letter would be much better. Speaking aloud to Alexis, she firmly declines the immediate visit by stating that it simply won't be necessary right now. Respecting her highly thoughtful decision, Alexis quietly accepts her firm, mature resolution with a soft nod. Shifting the aggressively heavy atmosphere, Sarah politely requests a strictly private moment with Lord Alexis for the following day. Caught completely off guard by her surprisingly bold request, a visible spark of nervous, undeniable surprise flashes across his face. Flustered by his intense, burning reaction, Sarah wildly stammers out a frantic, adorable string of panicked denials. A subtle, dangerously knowing smirk plays on his lips as he boldly steps back into her personal space with undeniable charm. The electric, undeniable tension between the married couple violently reignites, completely erasing the previous somber, heavy mood. Chuckling softly at her highly adorable panic, he smoothly apologizes for intentionally teasing her fragile nerves. Left utterly breathless by his playful, magnetic behavior, Sarah stares directly at her handsome husband with wide, loving eyes. Overcome by a rushing, unstoppable tide of deep affection, she softly admits to herself that she could never truly hate him. Gently apologizing for teasing her, he softly asks if his playful behavior has caused her to truly hate him. Shifting the topic gracefully, he casually mentions receiving a special gift from a great merchant house that she might enjoy. Processing the sudden surprise, she listens quietly with an expression of mild curiosity. Her eyes widen in absolute shock as she miraculously recognizes the legendary rainbow thread that is incredibly rare to find. Overwhelmed by the magnificent gift, she breathlessly wonders if holding such an incredible treasure is merely a dream. She profusely thanks him while firmly promising to treasure the precious thread, bringing a highly satisfied smile to his face. A beautiful, sunlit day dawns brilliantly over the expansive grounds of the elegant grand estate. Taking bold initiative, Sarah purposefully summons Alexis outside to the lush, vibrant gardens. Guiding him forward, she playfully instructs him to keep his eyes tightly shut until she gives the specific signal. With a gentle, excited voice, she finally tells awaiting Alexis that he may boldly open his eyes. He slowly opens his eyes, totally unprepared for the astonishing scene waiting before him. Complete astonishment violently washes over his face as he struggles to process the totally unexpected sight. A bright, cheerful voice suddenly rings out across the peaceful garden, warmly calling out to her beloved brother. Alexis freezes in sheer disbelief as the wonderful, impossible reality unfolds right in front of his eyes. Standing proudly on her own feet, a beaming Rosie happily welcomes her shocked brother back home. She excitedly announces that she has miraculously recovered enough to eat properly and even take pleasant walks. Sarah happily explains that they meticulously planned this tea party to show off Rosie's wonderful recovery as quickly as possible. Staring at her healthy body, Alexis marvels in absolute shock as Rosie cheerfully proves she is perfectly well. Overwhelming relief and pure, unfiltered joy violently crash into his usually highly stoic demeanor. Unable to hold back his intense emotions, he quickly rushes forward to pull his little sister into a tender, loving embrace. Sarah watches the deeply moving family reunion peacefully unfold with a warm, highly gentle smile. The reunited siblings share a quiet, beautiful moment of profound connection and immense relief. Gathering together joyfully, the three of them sit down at the garden table to fully enjoy their celebratory tea party. Alexis affectionately pats Rosie on the head, deeply thankful for her truly miraculous return to total health. Curious about the recent war, Rosie innocently asks how the expedition went and if Master Frederick is totally safe. Alexis pauses for a brief moment to heavily consider her innocent question regarding his noble comrade. He dryly remarks that Frederick commanded safely from the rear and remains completely uninjured, proving he is still the Ice Count. With a tiny hint of amusement, Alexis reveals that his loyal subordinates have recently started calling Sarah the Ice Countess. Slightly bewildered by the sudden news, Sarah tilts her head and innocently wonders if something is odd about the situation. Instead of taking offense, Sarah blushes deeply and declares herself highly honored to actually have a matching title with Master Alexis. A nearby observer sweat drops in utter confusion, wondering wildly why Sarah would feel genuinely honored by such intimidating gossip. A tense memory suddenly surfaces, showing a fierce, highly heated confrontation between Alexis and Frederick. Frederick angrily points out that Sarah was forcefully married off solely to please a great-aunt or help his sister. He ferociously demands that Alexis set her free instead of forcing her to suffer through a truly ridiculous white marriage. Pushing much harder, Frederick furiously questions if Alexis has ever bothered to actually consider Sarah's true feelings. Glaring intensely, Frederick issues a dark, terrifying warning that he will absolutely never forgive Alexis if he makes Sarah cry. He strictly commands Alexis not to selfishly drag an innocent Sarah into his highly complicated family problems. The heavy weight of Frederick's harsh accusations hangs thickly in the incredibly tense air between them. Returning swiftly to the present, Alexis silently processes the incredibly intense memory of that fiery argument. He gazes thoughtfully at Sarah, deeply reflecting on Frederick's highly harsh but fiercely protective words. Staring at her pure, highly joyful expression, Alexis silently wonders in massive shock if she actually harbors genuine, deep feelings for him.